Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and in season 3, we're redefining success for social entrepreneurs looking to grow their revenue. If you have reality-changing ideas, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into today's episode. Have you ever wondered exactly what is an impact investor and how you as a woman or a woman of color can get an impact investor excited about your work? Well, I'm interested in this topic too. I'm your host, Wendy Velos, and I'm here today with Janine Firpo to learn all about how we can dive into the realm of impact investing. So Janine, can you tell us a little bit more about you and who you are and how you make an impact?
Absolutely. So I love that on your website, you talk about the fact that you want to make mass change. And that is who I am as well. So I have managed to choose careers that have always been about changing the world for better. I started out in tech in the 80s, and then I went into working at the intersection of technology and business thinking to solve poverty around the world. And when I was doing that work, I learned about impact investing. And I actually call it values-aligned investing because it's really very much around what you care about in the world, what you want to see in the world, and making conscious choices about how your money is invested so that it's in alignment with those values. And I made a personal commitment about 15 years ago to do this with all of my capital. And I've been on that journey ever since. And my financial advisors weren't helping me. So when I retired from my other careers, I took my money back and I started solving for this. And I realized that all of us can do this, regardless of how much money we have or don't have. So I'm really about helping women in particular step into their financial power and realize that not only can they be strong, confident investors, but they can also put their money to work in the things that matter to them. And if enough of us do this, we can literally change the economy to the kind of economy that works for women.
I love that anything you look at, whether it's your LinkedIn or your website, it's very clear that you want to empower women and empower women to invest. And you maybe even invest for the beginning, first time and starting out their journey all the way to, like you said, taking people who are investors and really showing them how to align their values with what they want to put their money into. So I think it's a really awesome thing that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about how did you get started? And you said you just changed careers and then just decided to take all your money back. Can you dig in a little deeper? Because I'm sure there's a bigger story there.
Sure. No, I've changed careers 4 times. So career changing for me is not a hard thing. It takes time and energy, but it's something that I've done multiple times. So when I retired, I literally retired after 35 plus years of working my hiney off. I worked really hard in my life. And I really didn't know what I was going to do next, but I did know that I was committed to this goal of aligning all of my money with my values. And I was because I was a social entrepreneur before that was really a thing. And when I heard about impact investing and realized that this was possible, I thought, I took huge cuts in pay when I shifted my career to address poverty. I have worked most of my life to do things that I think are going to have an impact in the world. And my money is actually working against me. It's undermining me. And to be in full integrity with my goals, I need to be able to be sure that my money is supporting everything else I do. So I was thinking about that. I was working on my own investments after retirement. We're talking like 2018, 2019. And I started to realize that the slog that I had gone through to figure this out, it didn't have to be that hard anymore. And I wanted other women to understand how to do this because I knew that the vast majority of us want to, but it was so hard to figure it out that I decided I'm going to write a book. I was advised not to, but I decided I'm going to anyway. And so I ended up writing a book during COVID. And I also met another woman named Ellen Remmer, who was putting women together in investment clubs to teach them how to do this. So when my manuscript was finished, she and I joined forces and we started a nonprofit called Invest for Better. And we put women into groups, small groups, to help them start talking about and learning about their money. And what a lot of women tell us is it's so freeing to be in a small group of other women to talk about your money. For many of them, it's the first time they've ever talked about their money. So that's kind of how it happened. And that's what I'm doing.
Have you been looking all over the internet for templates that actually apply to social impact organizations? Check out learngrowthrive.wendyveloz.com for resources, courses, templates, and more. This is your one-stop shop for DIYer social entrepreneurs growing work that matters. Again, that's learngrowthrive.wendyveloz.com, where you can find solutions made just for you. I love the journey because that is such a moment of redefining success for yourself. I think a lot of people come to at least my space, thinking about career changes and how can I make a bigger impact in this second or third or fourth even time, around, kind of really getting closer and closer to that goal of making an impact. And you really found a way to dig all the way into not only make the impact for yourself, but to show other people how to continue to make an impact in what they care about as well.
Well, I think it's so important. I mean, and to be honest, I've had help along the way. So the first time I made a huge shift in my career, I actually hired a consultant to help me think about what really mattered to me and what really kind of kept showing up in my life. And I used a book called Something About Your Parachute, which I've forgotten the title right now, but
What color is your parachute? Is it that one?
Color is Your Parachute. But there's another book that I think is even better. It's called Designing Your Life, and it was created by two professors at the D School, the design school at Stanford, to help graduate students there figure out, what am I going to do after I graduate that makes an impact and makes a difference? And they use design principles to apply to yourself. And I think it's a really, really great book and a great way to think about this.
Oh, that's a good recommendation. I love book recommendations, even classics. I think like the other one is Who Moved My Cheese is the other one that tends to come up too. It's an old school book. And you said a couple of other things in there too about starting a nonprofit with a co-founder in this journey. And you've been told a few times, hey, maybe this isn't the right move, but you decided to persevere anyway and kind of followed your own gut instincts. Can you give us a little bit of insight? How do you as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's kind of always evolving in what you're doing, how do you know what your instinct is and trust it? Because that seems like you did it a few times, even in the short stories, but I'm sure there are plenty more.
It's a great question. So it's not like it was always with me. I actually started my life very single-minded. When I was 3 years old, I knew that I was going to be a doctor. You see how well that turned out? And by 9, I was going to be a cardiovascular surgeon. So I knew where I was going. Absolutely. And I thought that's the way things work, right? You put a stake in the ground, you're like, I'm going there, and boom, you do that. Well, I did that until I was in college. And in my last year of college, I decided, no, I really don't think I want to be a doctor. I want to be a marine biologist. So I went off to graduate school to become a marine biologist. And I was going to get my PhD, next stake in the ground, right? And then I realized, don't really think I want to do this. And literally had somebody suggest to me, just like the movie The Graduate, plastics is the future. Someone told me in the late 70s, computers are the future. And so I jumped into that. Well, what has happened to me over my life is that I have learned through experience that putting the stake in the ground doesn't always work. And in fact, what it can also often do is lead you astray because you're so dedicated to your stake, you're not paying attention to what is actually showing up around you. And as I started paying attention to those other things and that quiet voice inside, I started to realize they led me in good directions. And the more that happened to me, the more I trusted it and the stronger it became. So it was a learned skill and a practice. And now I really trust my intuition because it's proven through decades to work.
That's so interesting. I think I had the opposite. I think from like the time I was choosing college, I kept having intuition and thinking, okay, I'm just going to do this and that's going to be my stake. But I was like choosing the stake with the intuition and inadvertently, possibly not knowing really that was what I was doing. And then I had someone also intervene somewhere around when I was thinking I was going to be a psychologist and say, I think you're more of a social worker. You seem to really like working more like with people and for communities and like not necessarily like individual minds. And so it was very interesting to see how even people's suggestions to you can shift your processes or your thought processes. You know, it probably was better to push me towards that because I didn't even know social work was a thing at that point.
Isn't that fascinating, though? I mean, that experience that I had when I was in graduate school, I was literally in the summer hanging out at the pool. I was in graduate school in Florida, hanging out at the pool and thinking, I don't really know what I'm going to do with my life if I'm not going to be a biologist. And I talked to a complete stranger and told this guy my story. And he's the one that made that recommendation that completely influenced my life. And because of that, I have now learned I will tell anybody anything. If I have a problem, if I'm seeking an answer, it's like I'll tell a complete stranger because you never know where really interesting tidbits or sound advice are going to come from. And sometimes very different thinking is going to come from a direction that you hadn't planned. And it's not necessarily going to come from the friends and family that are close to you because they know you too well. So I've used that many times in my life since then. And it's always been fascinating, the kinds of people that tell me things that then I go, not a bad idea. I think I'll look into that one.
Oh, yeah. I got the best entrepreneur sales advice from a gentleman on a plane who sells heavy machinery to farmers. So you never know. Like, exactly. You never know. I love that.
Exactly. You never know who you're sitting down next to when you go to a dinner party. You never know who you're going to run into on a plane or in any other circumstance. So just always be nice and always be open, and you'll be surprised by the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. We met at a conference, so it's always, I think people can always run into values aligned folks. It's just, I think you listen for the words or the way people describe, even in the impact space, I don't always find that I align with a lot of people who are solely into the eco, kind of even the real estate impact investing part of it, but only for the sort of eco benefits and not necessarily for the community benefits. It's just not exactly a fit with my values or my perspective. So I tend to align more with people who are looking for like Main Street outcomes out of their real estate investments, little different. And I don't know if you found that too.
Well, what's really interesting, and again, this is why I call what I do values aligned investing, because a lot of times when we hear about impact investing, people are talking about the stock market, they're talking about the environment. So a lot of this kind of investing, people think it's all about the environment. And I don't. I'm like you. I think there are many aspects to it. And so in the courses that we offer at Invest for Better, one of the things that we go through, so we offer a core 6-part curriculum. And in the second meeting, you're introduced to something called the Sustainable Development Goals, which are 17 goals that were set by the United Nations to make the world a livable place for all of us. And governments, corporations, individuals, foundations are all working toward these goals. They're things like no poverty, climate change, clean water, but also gender equity and racial equity and sustainable living cities and communities, right? So the truth is that you can choose many different kinds of goals and values to invest your values. And what we recommend is that you pick from 1 to 5 of the sustainable development goals, and that's where you focus your money. And I'm totally with you on the whole local thing. I really like that.
Yeah, and not everybody has that perspective, and that's completely fine, right? I think that there's enough space to invest your time, effort, money in a lot of different things that are bigger than you. And so why not be choosy? And I like the idea of 5 because it does give people who have a kind of a wide variety of attention, things that they are interested or passionate about. It gives them a kind of a big gamut to say, no, there's something here for you, whatever your interest is.
And it also narrows it to a degree because if you want to do everything, you're going to get really lost, right? Like another thing that we have people do is in one of our courses on the environment and in investing with a sustainability conscience is Tesla. We ask the question, is Tesla a values aligned company or not? And for some people, it is, because for them, the biggest mark in support of Tesla is the fact that they have really revolutionized the EV industry. You can't deny that. But for other people, it's not, because of the way they show up around workers, the way they show up around women, the way they use power in other ways to build their cars. So you have to know within your value system what your priorities are when it comes to investing. Otherwise, you will either be completely upset all the time because you're not getting the perfect company that hits every single one of your boxes, which you just never will, or you are not able to move at all because you can't make a decision about something. So having something that's wide enough, as you suggest, to give you flexibility, but narrow enough to help you prioritize, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think there's so many things you just said in there that I want to unpack. I think the value sets of the business and businesses being transparent about their value sets and being able to be held accountable for their actions. I think those are really, really big pieces as consumers that we can maybe do a little bit better at aligning with what are our actual values as people, right? Our purchasing power is so important, but yet sometimes we're willing to invest in companies just because they have a shiny new product versus the fact that they know they've done some atrocities to build that product. And then the other thing is the sustainability. That word is thrown around so much with so many different facets and meanings, but it could mean something completely different for you and for me and for Joe Schmo. And yet we're all using the same word, thinking that it's a good word all the time, but not having the same metric of what does good sustainability look like for whatever facet we're looking at. So I want to hear these two thoughts from you. One on, how can we really look for those kinds of transparency or companies to align with when sometimes companies are maybe not so open about some of their practices or we don't know so much about them. And then second, what are your thoughts on being able to align with quote unquote sustainability when there's so many different definitions of it?
Yeah. So let me answer the second one first, because I think this is where it becomes personal. And again, why I call it values aligned, because that's very personal too. You get to decide for yourself what sustainability means to you. You don't have to listen to everything else. It gets too confusing. You can decide that. Part of the challenge that we have in the sustainable investing world, the ESG world, is that there are no standards there right now, which makes it really difficult, right, to know if something you're investing in is actually working for you or against you. So that's hard to know. But the good news is there are actually tools online. So this will get to your first question. There are actually tools online that are freely available that you can use to help you make these decisions. So if you're the kind of investor who chooses to invest directly in companies, so you buy individual stocks and you build your own stock portfolio, you can use a tool like something is called Ethos ESG, and you can look those companies up and it'll give you ratings across a whole bunch of different factors on how they think about that company. You can also use something called Just Capital if you care about workers' rights, because they rate companies on that. And that's freely available online. You could also do some research, find some great ESG funds that get really good ratings, and you can go use Morningstar or any other tool to see what companies are they investing in. So if there are companies that are invested in ESG funds, then that are reputable, then you can assume that those are companies that might be worth you investing in. So that's one way to go about it. And then if you're investing in funds, then my favorite tool is As You Sow, Invest Your Values. If you just go online and Google As You Sow, Invest Your Values, you will get access to this tool. You put the ticker into your stock fund, and you will see how that fund is rated on fossil fuels, gender equity, deforestation, weapons, prisons. There are a whole number of factors there as well. So that really helps too.
Oh man, and you have such a wide expertise in this that I want to ask another follow-up question to that question. Then, when you were mentioning, for some people I know in this audience, they may never have invested at all. When you're talking about investing in a individual company, which they might be familiar with, but then they might not be so familiar with a fund. Can you say a little bit more about like an impact fund, or why you would choose, say, that option versus just an individual company?
Sure. So, what's interesting is when I started investing, I invested in companies because that's all that was available at the time. I've been an investor for over 35 years, right? But when you invest in the individual company in the stock market, you can't just invest in one. You don't want all of your money, all your eggs in one basket, right? Because if something goes wrong with that company, that's controlling what happens with your portfolio. You want to diversify. So if you're in individual companies, you probably want to be in at least 30 plus companies. So as an individual investor, that's a lot of work to figure that all out, to manage all of that, etc. So a new well, it's not new anymore, but a product that came along since I've been an investor is a stock fund, and particularly index funds. So these are funds that hold hundreds, sometimes thousands of different stocks. So they're giving you exposure across an entire market, which really helps you have less volatility, less up and downs, and a better trajectory. Some people think they can outsmart the market and do better making their own individual decisions. I give them full credit for that. I don't have the time or patience myself. So stock funds give you diversity without having to make all of those decisions yourself.
Oh, that's perfect. Perfect explanation. Because I think that some people are always wondering, which company should I support? And they hear things like, an individual company going high or low and getting a lot of money off of that. But like you said, really to be, have a portfolio that's going to give you returns and maybe not be so volatile. 30 is a lot to even manage on your own. That's more than I thought. I would have said 10 to 15 is my guess, but I don't know. This is why I have a financial advisor.
You can do that, but the fewer companies you have, the less diversity you have and the more volatility you have. And interestingly enough, men tend to, this is not 100%, but generally speaking, men tend to invest more in companies. Women tend to invest more in funds. And men tend to buy and sell more frequently than women. So women come up with a strategy and then they hold it. And because of that, research shows that women outperform men consistently. Our strategy actually works better.
The long-term strategy. That's so awesome. I love all these little pieces, these little nuggets that we learn in these episodes, because there's so many things that people could take away from, how to kind of get involved or start, all the way to like when you're kind of in it, what are the best choices for you? And I'm curious, if somebody is just starting out as, say, a business and thinking, okay, I want to attract impact investors, what is the best thing they could do to kind of move in this direction?
So that's also a really interesting question. All right. So about raising money from impact investors, right? So most of the time when companies want to go out to raise money, the way they think about doing it is through angel investing, venture capital model, equity model, right? And that's what most people are currently set up to do, is equity. The problem with equity, from my point of view, is it puts enormous demands on a company to grow really fast, because the investors are seeking, and this is true whether you're talking about a social business or not, they are seeking to have their money returned in 7 to 10 years, and they don't even want to invest in a company unless it has the potential to return 10x, right? So it's got to return a lot to them, which puts enormous pressure on the entrepreneur. The angel investor is also assuming that out of a portfolio of 10 investments, only one will really hit that, and that one company will drive their returns. The rest of the companies will either return a little bit, bunch of them, at least half of them will go out of business. I hate that model. I'm an angel investor. I've done it, and I realize I hate that model for everything. I don't want to invest in companies that are going to go out of business. I don't want to invest in companies that are going to be pushed into that kind of growth, because 99% of businesses are not appropriate for that kind of money. 99% of businesses need patient capital to build their business at a slower scale. And those are the kinds of businesses that I'm interested in. So I'm more interested now in private debt, in revenue-based investing, in other forms of investing that are non-equity at the private level. And the good news is there are many companies like that. There are also opportunities to raise capital differently. A friend of mine has written a book called Raise Capital Your Own Way, I believe is the title of it. Her name is Jenny Kassan, Kassan, and she's a lawyer who has helped female entrepreneurs go after alternative forms of financing who don't want the equity model. So as advice that I would give an entrepreneur is, if you don't want a hockey stick growth, then think about alternatives to equity investing.
Yeah, I'm still learning about crowdfunding. I feel like I'm very behind the times, but I'm trying to catch up, because there are so many different ways to apparently get investors involved in your business, and then so many different things you can give them besides equity. So I'm just starting to learn about revenue-based investments and things like that. And I think it's all fascinating.
I love it, because as long as they don't go out of business, even if the company is growing at a slower pace than you would have wanted, you still are getting some money back, and you're more likely to get your total investment back, at least through that kind of investment, than you are through an equity investment. Whereas basically they either sell and you get your money back then, or they don't, and you maybe never see your money again, right?
Yeah, that's always what the risk is with all of these investing things. And I think that's why some people, it's a barrier for them, right? That they're not interested in having that risk. And so for the people who are listening and are not at all starting an investment, or they haven't started in their investment journey, I guess, what could you say to those people to maybe get started? Could they reach out to you all to get started, or how does someone get started? I guess is the question.
So there are a couple things. So first of all, I really hear that about risk, and that's particularly true of women, because we have been taught that investing is scary and we shouldn't do it. And we've been taught to save. So a lot of women do save. In fact, a lot of women save 70 cents on the dollar in cash. The problem is that you're not realizing is that is also a risk, because not only is your money not growing, it's actually going down in value over time, because the amount of money that you're getting from a savings account, the interest you're getting, never keeps even close to inflation. So if you're just keeping your money in cash in a savings account, then you're losing money. If you want to grow your wealth, you have to invest. And starting as young as possible is really important. So if you are in your 20s, and if you're 20 and you invest $100 a month, even just that for 10 years, $100 a month for 10 years, and you stop investing after 10 years, you will have more money when you retire than someone who starts investing $100 a year at 30 and invests for the next 30 years. So because of compounding, where everything you invest, the interest comes back, and then that all grows, and then that all grows. Because of that, the younger you start, the better off you are. And the advice that I would give is start small. You can start with as little as 100. Start small. Start doing it. Just do it. And recognize that if you're investing in the stock market, it's a long-term game. So it's going to go up and down. Just expect it. Just sit it out. When it goes down, it'll go back up. Historically, doesn't mean it always will, but historically it has gone back up. So just sit it out and wait it out. The other thing, if you want to be a values-aligned investor and you really just want to start, then think about where your cash is sitting. Who do you bank with? Because if you are banking with a large bank, chances are they're using their money to invest in things that you hate. So you can move your savings account super easily to a local community bank. You were talking earlier about your community. All my cash is sitting in two banks in my town that are providing loans to underserved populations for cars, for school, for homes. So my money is my savings account, my checking account is working to enhance the lives of people in my community, which it would not be doing if it was sitting in a big major bank.
Such a good advice.
Yeah. So
I love that. And I love that because my one of my savings accounts is also in a green bank that's a local bank here in the Maryland area. So shout out to Forbright Bank. They're really amazing. What I would be curious about just in our last question, I know you have a book, you also have a nonprofit. You also, I think, are speaking and doing podcasts and other things that people might be interested in. So could you just give us a quick plug for you? Where could people find you and what might they want to connect to you for?
Oh, sure. So my book is called Activate Your Money, Invest to Grow Your Wealth or Build a Better World. And that is available anywhere you buy books. So it's on all the online sites. Some bookstores have it. The nonprofit is called investforbetter.org. And the easiest way to connect with me is through LinkedIn. I post every day. So I'm constantly posting on LinkedIn. And I'm also very open to having people just email me at jfirpo@investforbetter.org.
Awesome. And I know I almost let you escape at the one very big question for this season, which was, how have you redefined success for yourself? And I said, okay, we got to go back and do this question. So before we go on to end this episode, over the course of your journey, you talked about career changes, but I'm just curious if any other things you want to share with our audience about how you've redefined success over your journey.
Well, I'm going to keep it in the conversation about money. So we've all heard about financial freedom, right? Which enables us to live the lives we want. We've heard of financial independence, which has a similar connotation. I talk about financial fulfillment. And so I'm redefining what success means related to money because it's not only getting to that financial freedom, but it is also getting to a sense of joy around knowing what my money does in the world. And that for me is redefining the value and the purpose of money. I want it to be fulfilling as well for myself, for the community I live in, for the world.
Oh, that's perfect. That's a perfect soundbite. I'm glad I asked that question before we left. All right, everyone. Thank you for being here for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. I hope we all find financial fulfillment. And thank you so much for our guest, which has really been an enlightening conversation for me. And I've been so enthralled to hear from you, Janine. So I thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes. All right, everyone. Come back for another episode. Thanks for joining us for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to having you come back. If you're curious about something we shared, make sure you check in the show notes below. And do you want the secret to make your nonprofit or business more sustainable and more profitable? Hop into my Learn, Grow, Thrive University, where I give you exclusive access to resources, mini courses, and templates for free. All you need to do is sign up at wendyvelos.com/university. See you next episode.